The Reaper, aka the Cataclysm class tank in Generation Zero, is definitely the hardest enemy to deal with. They spawn as a rival, sort of. They don't level up like regular ones. They just kind of spawn in at their max level. They can only appear when your region is above level 21, and a few other things have to be met as well. You have to be, I forget which level it is. Anyway, here is everything I have learned over my uh, excessive playtime in this game about the Reaper. So, the first thing you need to know about when fighting a Reaper is that you're not going to be able to sneak up on this thing. If it even sort of spots you, it will automatically put up its shields and start shooting, regardless of what difficulty or anything like that. Because you're not really meant to sneak up on this thing like a regular tank. You're meant to fight this head on. It's meant to be a long, hard boss fight. So, the first thing to know about when you actually start fighting one is the shields. It has 4 total shields, 2 on the shoulders, 2 on the knees, left and right. Now, the best way to take out these shields that I have found personally is 50 cal FMJ ammo with an experimental PVG if you've got one, because that does an insane amount of component damage and can take out the shields pretty quickly. The issue is you can only hit the shields when they're down, which during the beginning phase of the fight is not usually very long intervals. So you gotta find good times to do it and pick your shots carefully. You also gotta be careful because it will be attacking you whether the shields are up or not. Although, once the shields are down, you have a slightly easier time. Next comes damaging the body of the Reaper itself. Now, there's a few ways you can do this. The best, most effective way that I have found is not necessarily going for the components it has, which it does share lots of components with tanks, and that is useful. But the better method that me and my friends have found is, again, equip 50 cal FMJ ammo, and once the shields are down, shoot at its guns. The Reaper is equipped with a machine gun that fires incendiary rounds and an artillery weapon that fires radioactive mortars at you, which is designed to flush you out of cover. Both can kill you almost instantly if you're not careful. And what we found is the best thing to do is target these guns. Now, you won't see much of a visual effect for shooting these, but once they come off, it does an insane amount of damage. In fact, what we found is the Reaper is almost dead in terms of its just raw health if you've just shot off these and the tick pod on its ass. So that's the way we recommend going for it, is aim for the guns if you can, take them out. It takes a long time, usually the entire fight, before you can get both the guns down. But once you do, you'll know they're down because they fell off. And then once you've done that, it'll be very close to dead, even on Gorilla. And you also got to watch out for a few other attacks too. Not only is the Reaper equipped with, like I mentioned, the gun and the mortar, it also has the ability to throw out APOC class ticks, although it does this almost never. I have only seen it a few times. But the much more dangerous attack is the one you just saw, the thermobaric explosion. We like to call it the atomic fart or the nuke. Basically, what the Reaper does is it vents a ton of flammable gas in the nearby area and then ignites it. You'll know it's doing this because even if its shield generators are down, it can put its shields back up during this time, and you cannot damage it while the nuke is firing. And then it will light the gas and kill everything in a certain radius around it. The only way to avoid this is to get behind solid cover, not dead machines. Those do not work. We have learned that the hard way. You have to be behind solid cover, so like a building, a tree, a rock that sticks out of the ground weirdly. Any of those will work. And in this clip, you can see me using a destroyed house for cover, and it works. Now, another thing to be aware of with the thermobaric is there is another version of it that can only happen when the Reaper is close to dead. If I remember correctly, it will only do it when it's at about 7% health on Gorilla. And this second thermobaric is a self-destruct. It is confirmed that if the Reaper dies by the self-destruct, you get worse loot from it. But also, unlike the regular thermobaric, this self-destruct is undodgeable. Even if you're behind cover, doesn't matter. You will die from this if it goes off. And the way to know this is happening is the Reaper will start making a different alarm sound, and you will see pink gas coming out of the front of it. Not to be confused with the the red lights from its shields during the regular thermobaric, or from the purple gas it can vent if you get too close to it. You have to make sure this is a pink gas combined with a specific alarm sound effect. And if you see that, do not bother going to cover. Just shoot it and pray that you can kill it before the self-destruct goes off. And like I mentioned, it is confirmed that if it self-destructs, you get worse loot from it. So you do want to avoid it self-destructing at all costs if you can. Another thing to note about the thermobaric explosion is that it summons 4 Phoenix class runners. Now this is usually not a huge deal. These can usually be dealt with pretty fast, but as a result of this, I do highly recommend having a good crowd control weapon, either a K-Pist, AG4, or preferably an experimental KVM-59 if you've got that, because that will probably be your most effective way to take them out quickly. Important thing to mention also is the Reaper carries over basically everything regular tanks have. So most notably in this case, I'm talking about the stomp attack, which is sometimes it will just run around and stomp everything near it. That is an almost instant kill if you get caught in it. So you got to be careful of that when it does it. Now, it usually doesn't unless you've shot off its guns, but it is something to be aware of because it can be very hard to get away from if you don't see it coming and don't get out of the way quickly. The most effective weapon against the Reaper itself is obviously the PVG-90. Mostly because of how precise it is. You can do lots of damage to individual components with that gun, which is what makes it so effective on regular tanks too. And that's why you see me shooting the Reaper's guns with it, because it's a very easy way to do lots of damage to them quickly. Now, another thing to note with the PVG-90 is I highly recommend bringing at least 300 total rounds for it to a Reaper fight, especially on guerrilla difficulty, because a single Reaper can easily burn through 100 to 200 rounds of 50 cal if you're not careful, especially if you're playing on guerrilla. It has a lot of health. You also should definitely bring as many advanced first aid kits as you can. I usually carry 30 with me, and that carries me through most Reaper fights. Mostly because, like as you can see in this clip, almost all of its attacks are near deaths or deaths, and you need advanced first aid kits in order to be able to recover from those fast enough to counterattack effectively. When it comes to loot you can get from the Reaper, there's a few things. It can give you basically everything a regular rival can, like experimental weapons, lots of ammo. The Reaper recently was added the ability to give uranium as a drop, which I think I actually do get in this clip here. But most uniquely is the Reaper can give you the experimental sledgehammer, which I do not believe can be gotten from other rivals, but though I could be wrong about that. That's what I remember seeing, and I've never gotten an experimental sledgehammer from a regular rival. I have only gotten them from Reapers. Having adrenaline shots on hand is also extremely important, because you saw in this clip, even with my extensive experience with them, I died a few times during this confrontation with one. And I was kind of rusty when I recorded this, but still, even the best players I've played with against these things still die a couple times usually. So I recommend having at least a few adrenaline shots on you if you've got them. And that has gotten easier recently because they added the ability to craft them if you unlock the schematic for them. But I don't know how long that takes for an average player because I haven't gotten there yet, unfortunately. But that's another thing to note. Adrenaline shots are extremely important against them because especially their mortars and their machine gun can melt through a player in seconds if they catch them off guard with it. And you gotta be aware that sometimes, particularly with the machine gun, the Reaper will switch which player it's shooting at with it, like in the middle of shooting, which can catch you completely off guard. There's no lead up to it. It just kind of happens sometimes. So that's another thing to be aware of, is if that does happen, you are probably screwed if you are not in cover when it does, because it'll just melt through you right then and there. So that's another thing to remember, is if you see it pointing at another player, don't assume you're safe, because it totally might just pivot right to you, especially if it kills the other player, which happens a lot. Probably the most infuriating thing I've ever seen happen from a Reaper is we've had a few cases where one wandered a little too close to a base we had built, and the thermobaric just destroys all the walls nearby if it goes off. So that's another thing you need to be very careful of is do not fight these things next to your bases because they will destroy them. And especially do not fight them from inside your bases. Those will not protect you from the thermobaric at all. I highly recommend having at least some shock ammo and either an AG4 or something similar on hand so that if it does begin self-destruct, you can immediately pull out shock ammo and pelt it, because I have found that that is one of the quickest ways to kill it during that phase, because it cannot put its shields up and you just hit components with it, and that can help deal with it. You cannot stun it out of it with shock ammo, but you can use shock ammo's increased damage to hopefully kill it fast enough, is what I've found. So that concludes the basics of the Reaper. That's about most of what you really would need to know for going up against one for the first time. I certainly wish I'd known some of these things the first time I fought one. They're pretty hard to deal with, but once you figure them out, they're actually pretty easy. You can see me and this other guy in this clip completely trounce this one because we were prepared. Even though we got caught in a pretty awkward place with not much cover, we still managed to turn it around just because both of us have done this so many times. I've played like 300 hours this game. I think the other guy had like 900 or something. So once you've gotten into understanding how they work, you have a good feel for how they fight. They're not as daunting as they may first appear. They're still very fun to fight though, but they're not as scary at a certain point. Obviously it took me a while to get there, but I did, and I still fight them for fun sometimes. I don't usually kill them by myself because it's way harder without someone else to distract them, to be honest. But they are still definitely killable solo. I've seen crazy people kill these things with a 1C Malaire PP occasionally. It's insane how good some people are at this game. But anyway, that's most of what you really need to know when going up against the Reaper for the first time. So yeah, thanks for watching.